I know I keep opening videos with a preface that explains why I'm not massively hyped for mainstream media, but I think it's very appropriate for this review. Plus I couldn't think of a funny way to segue into the last Marvel film that I saw, which was Black Panther in 2018, and the last DC film I saw was Justice League back in 2016. And no, it wasn't because of the fabled superhero fatigue, I was just bored of the excessive CGI bullshit that wasn't even campy fun, it was just boring. So I wasn't really on board the hype train for when this new Batman was announced. Further add on to that Matt Reeves was helming the project, director of those two Planet of the Apes movies with the most bizarre titling you'll ever see, the Cloverfield movie which has been retroactively fucked by its franchising, and that awful remake of Let the Right One In. So when the trailers dropped, I found out that Best Boy cinematographer Greg Fraser was attached to the project, which at least put some of my mind at ease, but then it rug pulled me and revealed a PG-13 rating. And before you type a 1,000-word thesis in the comments, no, I'm not someone who thinks in order for a film to be good, it must have excessive amounts of gore, but I really didn't think a 7-type film could be made adhering to a PG-13 rating. Look, I didn't say I was good at foreshadowing. So yeah, I wasn't exactly shitting my britches to see this film, but after getting ganked in the alleyway by some fine arts majors with shockingly sharp tarot cards, I decided to challenge my perspective and watch the new Batman, and you know what? It was kinda good. It's nowhere near as bad as the sandpaper handjob that is the new Matrix movie, but it's also not a Jackson Pollock painting, i.e. jizz theft. And as much as I am going to sound negative in this review, I want to make this clear. I did enjoy this film, but that doesn't mean I can't be critical to something that I like. First of all, this game really makes you feel like Batman, but secondly, I thought all of the actors were pretty good, with Paul Dano and Robert Pattinson being the two standouts. Of course, everyone is going to be talking about Robert Pattinson in sole comparison to the Twilight franchise, but he has more than proven he is a versatile actor that gives it his all and borderline becomes unrecognizable through his mannerism. Portrayal of an emo Batman that hasn't fully developed into the perfect crime fighter was really well done, and I liked how restrained he was in verbal expression but still managed to communicate a lot through his eyes. In terms of the Riddler, I did really want to see Jim Carrey dropped into this grim version of Batman, but that would have changed the villains to be anti-vaxxers. So I very much enjoyed Paul Dano's portrayal of an average Redditor. His introduction was actually pretty well done, and whilst his vlogs did feel a little too derivative of the Jonksters, I wouldn't really say it was poorly executed or poorly acted. It wasn't as good as Funny Religious Man in There Will Be Blood, but it was a very good performance regardless. Zoe Kravitz was pretty good as Catwoman, but her mannerisms do very much remind me of how cartoonish her character is in premise. Like, yep, she is constantly doing a catwalk, because get it? Cats. Luckily, Zoe Kravitz was able to ground this character for what the tone of the film was going for, but it is a reminder of how ridiculous both Catwoman and Batman are as people. Colin Farrell as the Penguin was the right level of cheese, but the prosthetics on him, holy fuck. There were a couple of side characters that didn't do the greatest job with their performance, but luckily they weren't in the movie for that long. Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon was good, but he really wasn't given a character to work with. He was definitely the least developed. He really didn't seem to have a life outside of his police work. I know the Nolan film depiction is a little cheesy, but at least there is something beyond literally explaining everything to the audience like we have an intellectual degrading kink. The narration has been widely credited as a homage to both the source material and older noir film. And I'm willing to bet a Jimmy Fallon NFT on the people that are saying that have not seen a noir film. Yes, it's set in a world where Tumblr didn't ban porn. Yes, cops are corrupt, but the rest of the filmmaking and genre conventions are drawing from modern thrillers. And noir isn't the only genre or style to have fucking narration, you crumpet. That being said, I thought it was quite fitting to bookend the film with narration, and it acts as a more subtle expression of, you are just like me, Batman, when it comes to the villains and hero comparison. There were some lines of dialogue that unfortunately felt very first drafty. They were very utilitarian in a way that a screenwriter would just dot point various actions and lines that have to be said in an objective manner in order to progress the scene. I was really glad that Batman was an actual detective in this rather than being a giant slab of meat, and there was a lot of scenes dedicated to Batman actually investigating shit. Took us like 40 years to finally get a film depiction like this, but finally, we got it. And Commissioner Gordon is thankfully going to spoon-feed us all the information. Finally, cinema for single-celled organisms. Every single inference that the film makes will be met with Gordon going, What does this mean, Batman? Oh boy, this doesn't look good. Here, let me read out this card for you, Batman, because you are illiterate. Oh, I sure think this guy is dead. Dear all writers out there, if you're writing a story with the attempted tone and seriousness of a David Fincher thriller, then don't treat your audience like babies that can't be left alone for more than 5 seconds in the refrigerator aisle. Honestly, Greg Fraser should just replace Vegemite as our nation's icon because this man's cinematography is very damn good. Everyone and their grandmothers has talked about the growing popularity of underexposure, but the hit 90s TV series Frasier is able to motivate the dark images. A lot of DPs ironically don't know how to take it up the ass, but more importantly, don't understand that diegetic motivated lighting is a thing, and that you still need to apply basic lighting and composition fundamentals in order to make a good underexposed image. And Greg Fraser definitely understands this. That isn't to say that every frame is a painting in this film. There are some shots here and there that are a little too murky for their own good, but this is definitely one of the best looking recent blockbusters. Creative transition. There are several scenes of analyzing murders and their details that would have been effective to show, but I guess that's too extreme for this kiddie movie about murderous psychopaths killing the rich as biblical irony to incite paranoia of authority figures and systems. Makes absolutely no sense to show anything that might make you emotional. Now, there is definitely an argument for implied violence. I mean, your boy Mikhail Haneke has built an entire career out of it, but there is a difference between building that into your story and then just editing around it in order to maintain a rating. In Haneke's films, you're often forced into hearing horrifying events off screen, leaving you to conjure truly horrible images in your mind. But in the case of the Batman, they openly talk about details of a victim's body that would be relevant to the case, but we as an audience don't get to see those details. Yes, a detective story where we don't get to see the clues. Thank you, Matt Reeves. It's called Let the Right One In for a fucking reason. Whilst the music in certain moments was pretty effective in creating a foreboding and brooding nightmare, it was also really overbearing in certain scenes. Maybe I should stop watching depressing Russian films, but I love filmmakers that don't need to rely on extremely obvious or manipulative music for emotions that are already being communicated in the diegetic. All of the love scenes between Batman and Catwoman had really intrusive warm strings, like apparently if the music wasn't there we wouldn't understand they like each other. Ah yes, high-pitched strings for jump scares. Thank you, Matt Reeves. I see you still haven't learned from Let the Right One, oh I'm sorry, Let Me In. Fuck you, Matt Reeves! I enjoyed a lot of the action set pieces as they were much more sparse as compared to modern blockbusters, which made them more impactful. Not only that, but they actually served a purpose in the overall narrative, instead of meaningless Zack Snyder destruction porn. I really enjoyed the slower pacing that allowed for scenes to breathe instead of rushing to the next plot point, and for a near 3-hour film it didn't really drag at all. The atmosphere though is top notch. The blend of drab rain drenched lowlife with expressionist gothic stylization was very well done. Thankfully, instead of the cinematography just doing the heavy lifting, the set design and costumes all work together to create a singular vision that actually depicts Gotham as a character. The most disappointing thing about The Dark Knight Rises is the fact that it exists. But more importantly, the upheaval of the rich throwing them down onto street level was relegated to one small montage that ironically felt so detached from everything around it. But in the Batman, Gotham actually feels like a living, breathing replica of Britain. Unfortunately, the third act does feel a little too McClunky. Going from a Zodiac manhunt to Roger Corman's 2012 was a bit of a leap. Not to say it drops off in terms of filmmaking quality, but it kind of felt like jumping the gun and artificially raising the stakes. The car chase was pretty cool though. But now is the point that I get into spoilers, so if you want to avoid those like you probably avoid women, then skip to this timestamp. I really liked the focus on Batman's heavy footsteps as he approached from the shadows in the opening. The thumb drive joke was darkly funny and felt very appropriate for a Riddler in this tone and style. That being said, a lot of the comedy didn't really work for me, but at least it was quite sparse. I liked the whole funeral sequence. I very much enjoyed the Arkham Asylum scene between Batman and the Riddler. So the Riddler had 500 followers and basically created an organized militia that could function without him being present at their pseudo JFK assassination. Am I microwaved, or is this not kinda dumb? Firstly, 500 followers means Jack and Dexter shit. There is countless documentation of social media groups that tried to mobilize their cause in the real world and fell flat on their face. Falcone's death was also weirdly executed, haha. Like, was he shot in the head or chest? There was no bullet wound, but I guess there do be some blood. Not too much though, we don't want to scare the kiddies on what being assassinated by a sniper rifle looks like. Also, the multiple reveals of corrupt politicians politicians working with crime bosses was kinda Like, yeah, that would definitely happen in Gotham, and that does happen in the real world, but it wasn't given a lot of depth or moral complexity. It just kind of felt like a narrative we've seen a billion times without the Witcher 3 levels of moral grayness.
I'm a witcher.
The small interaction between Riddler and the jokester was pretty cringe for how obvious it was a sequel franchise tease. Also, that ending motorcycle scene was questionable. Like, this isn't Titan. What are you doing, Matt Reeves? It's called Let the Right One In for a fucking reason. In conclusion, The Batman was a fun blockbuster that for the most part naturally blended a dark action film with an atmospheric detective story. And I hope this can change the perception of the Lovecraftian beings that control the big studios to make blockbuster films that actually have characters and stories with weight and scenes where characters actually talk to each other. I am glad that a lot of people are absolutely loving this, but if I see one more horny comment about Catwoman, I will sacrifice a live goat to bring a good harvest upon us. What's that, like a 7? Yeah, I think that's a 7.